tip. Shit. How do I have it? Why is my face being cut off? Yeah. Oh, look at that bald head you have, Gregory. So, two things. First things first, video setting. Background. What?
No.
No, it's not. We told you we'll come get you. We're going to make it go by longer when you keep coming out. Jib on. There you go. That's better. Testing. Rubbers. Rubber. Rubbers. Terry. Hey. All right, come on. Why is it not going? Sorry, Terry, you're going to have to wait 30 seconds. As Greg fucks with this. Volume. Oh boy. Testing. Shit. It's on control panel. Sound, power options. No. Speakers. Play that. What else? Enable. Testing. Test. Hello. Hello. Fuck, I hope that works. We're gonna find out. Terry, if it don't, it don't. Test. Nope, it's definitely not. Why is it doing that? Change system sounds. Hey, Terry.
Greg, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. Let me adjust my sound. I was having some issues with my last call, so I'm going to try to adjust this really fast.
Okay.
Oh, why are you doing that? Yeah. So if I put you on this. Nope, still doing it. I'm willing to bet it's going to be actually Zoom itself. If I go here, back here, no audio. Ah, yes. There we go. Perfect. I got it now.
Technology, gotta love it, huh?
Yes, sir. How you doing?
I'm good. Yourself? You all set for the holidays?
I am actually. For the first time in my life, I actually get to enjoy the holidays. I was in the military for 5.5 years, and then on the road for about 2. So,
what branch were you in?
Army?
Army. Our
Yeah.
daughter's in the Air Force.
Oh, excellent. Thank you for her service.
Well, Space Force, I should say. I say the Air Force, but it's now what she does is Space Force. So
excellent. Awesome. Yeah. No, I was active duty for through 4.5, and then 1 year in the Colorado National Guard. And no, I missed the structure, the foundation, everything about it.
where were you stationed?
out in Fort Carson, Colorado.
Oh, you were down in Colorado Springs down there in that area?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
see your background, you did law enforcement. How long did you do that?
All told, about 10 years. So I started out in Santa Barbara as a reserve
Wow.
officer. And then when our daughter was born and we moved to Cincinnati, I did it full time. It was kind of one of those things where, when my wife met me and we got married, I was a suit and tie Monday through Friday kind of guy. And it's
Mhm.
like, gee, hon, I'd like to work nights now and weekends and all that kind of fun stuff. So, but she was incredibly supportive and I loved it. It was an unbelievably great job.
It's really interesting with the weekend force thing. Do you get your post post certification? I believe that's the correct terminology.
Yeah.
How does that work with being part-time?
So basically, you get the way it worked in California. And I mean, I look back on it now, and you basically went to a class at Santa Barbara City College.
Mm.
And the class was proctored by a sergeant from the Santa Barbara PD. And so, you did, it was kind of a mini academy. You did driving, you did firearms, you did defensive tactics, you did all that kind of stuff. And then when you finished the course, you were eligible to apply to any law enforcement agency around the state to be a reserve officer. So, I mean, some people just did it to do it. I just want to take the course, see what it's like. I mean, I knew that, I wanted to apply to Santa Barbara, and, I did. I got on. I want to say there were 30 of us in the class. I think 5 of us got on with Santa Barbara PD. And they liked me enough that they asked me if I'd do it full time, but that was about the time we were getting ready to move. So it's like, sorry, I can't do that. So I did it in Cincinnati, and it was a lot of fun. I worked with a lot of good people.
The only reason why I ask is that's kind of what my transition is looking like. I've been doing podcasting for about coming on a year, and recording for about 6. And I just put a lot of time in just understanding the foundation of this, but it's not 100% what I like to do. I mean, I love to communicate with people. I love to just get in the dirt and understand like what makes them operate and how they get past these different things that they experience, and how I can share that to the world and establish a transformation. Because that's the leader in me from being, I was a sergeant in the Army,
Okay.
where I want to hone these things that these people successful taken away, and then take that and share it and help people grow. But that's what I'd like, but it's not fulfilling. And I'm thinking law enforcement is my true calling. Ever since I was 8, it's always been my true calling.
And I think probably based on your experience, especially in the Army and things like that, I've had a couple people, especially young people, very young people, not that you're not young at all, but young people reach out to me and, yeah, you were in law enforcement. What do you think are the things you need to be able to do? And I said, one of the things is you need to be able to talk to people. I said, you got to put that cell phone down, and you've got to get out there, and, you've got to be able to talk to the guy who's living in the penthouse condominium the same way you got to be able to talk to the guy who's homeless on the street. If you can do that, you'll be successful in law enforcement. But if you can't, and from, I still have plenty of friends back in CPD, and my old partner is actually a firearms instructor. So she's kind of under the academy. And she's like, one of the biggest challenges is that, these young kids can't talk to people. And, they don't realize, somebody's giving you clues that they're going to kick your ass in a minute.
Mhm.
And you're not perceptive enough to pick that up, and, you're going to get hurt, or you're going to get somebody else hurt in that. So it's a big issue, especially I think with young people today, but with being in the Army and that, I'm sure, and with doing podcasting, I'm sure you won't have any problem with that.
Yes. Also, I did a lot of different security, from armed security, unarmed security, undercover, and then I was a manager at UPS, had 18
Okay.
people. So I have a very diverse background of positions that I held that is all applicable, and everything I apply. It's a universal standard that I hold myself to, that it's just malleable in any position I take. And I was always just curious as far as with policing and young people, they don't, why don't they even consider the fact that policing is more of a sociological approach to how they are being perceived as in uniform? Have you ever experienced like the misinterpretation of a young officer approaching the situation and not having a clue what's happening?
It's funny. I am old enough to remember when there was a show on television back in the late 60s, early 70s called Adam 12. I don't know if you've ever heard of it or seen it. It followed basically these two beat cops in Los Angeles. And it was just kind of it was a scripted show. It wasn't kind of like Cops where they just follow them around. It was a scripted show, but it's on one of the kind of throwback channels that we have here, in Denver. And my wife and I occasionally watch it, and it'll be like, the same stuff they were dealing with in 1968, 1970 is the same stuff we're dealing with today. It's just the people change, and now they call you, an MF, or, back then they called you a pig or the fuzz or something, back then, but it's the same stuff, and I don't know. I mean, like I said, I loved it. My grandfather was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954. So he was in the police department during Prohibition, during, Al Capone and all the gangs shooting the city up and stuff like that. And he died when I was like 7, but I just remember the stories he would tell. My dad was like, absolutely not. You're not going to be a cop. You're going to go to college. You're going to, you're going to make something of yourself. But kind of like you, it was my passion. It was in my heart. It was like, this is what I was supposed to do. And, I hope it works out for you, because it's a very rewarding position.
Mhm.
Although today I kind of question why anybody in their right mind would want to do it. You make less money than a plumber. Nobody wants you there. And everybody lies to you that you talk to, and I always tell that to people. I'm like, think about that. That's going to be your life. Nobody wants a cop around. It's never, whether we're knocking on your door to tell you that, your daughter's dead, or we're stopping you and giving you a ticket, and then when you get on scene, everybody's lying to you because they want to make their story seem the one, that's the one you believe. So you'll take action against the other party. So you've got to be, and you've got some life experience, which I think will definitely help you, realize that, that's baloney, you're the one who's the problem here. So.
Oh yes, I spent a lot of time. I have an associate's. It's general studies, but I emphasized in psychology and just studying human behavior and understanding how people tick. I was also a Krav Maga instructor. I did Krav Maga for about
Okay. Yeah.
7.5 years, and I just have a lot of different backgrounds. Like I tailored like my whole upbringing to become a cop. Like I was ready. Like mixed martial arts, security, army. Like I'm ready. And then the moment I'm about to go through it, because I was actually going through it in Overland Park, Kansas City.
Okay.
I went through everything on the process, and at the very end, where I'm supposed to interview, I believe the chief and a couple other people, like a board. I just I felt like there's more out there I should be doing. It's like everything I've been waiting for since I was 8 years old has finally came to this very point. And it's like, I'm not ready for this to be over. Maybe there's something else I'm supposed to do. And then I back out of it. And now here I am doing podcasting. And I think this is what was missing, because I really needed to adjust how I communicate to people, because I was on army lingo and being direct and just not empathizing with anybody. It's like, why can't you do this? What's wrong with you? And it's now I shifted to more of a humanistic approach, and now I feel like I might be ready at that point to go
Well,
on.
good. I hope it works out. I really do. It's a very rewarding field. Nobody goes into it to make money. You're not going to get rich doing it, but you're not going to get financially rich. I think people get rich in the heart and the head by the people they help, and you make a difference, and you treat people like people. And I was kind of like you. I was in the drug unit for 3.5 years, and I liked to talk to the guys that, we kicked their door in and stuff like that. It's like, well, what are your goals? And, you had so many young men, mostly of color, who were, 20, 22, 25, who had no goals, no dreams, no aspirations, because they knew that, probably next week the drug dealer down the street was going to, shoot them in the head and take over their business. So their philosophy was, I'm going to live large, and I'm going to live large now for as long as I can, because and some of them were incredibly intelligent people that if they would have, taken that intelligence and used it for something positive, probably could have been very successful in whatever they decided they wanted to do. But, I mean, that's the thing. I think that, at least from my perspective, the most frustrating thing was you are called to try to solve a problem in 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes that has been festering for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. You're not going to solve the problem. I was a hostage negotiator with the SWAT team, and if you were talking to me, it was pretty much the worst day you've ever had in your life. But I didn't cause the problem. I'm just trying to get you out of it. And there were not a lot of times, but enough times where people said, no, it's not worth it. And, put a bullet in their head or something like that. And, I never lost any sleep over that, because I knew I did the best I could. And I also knew I didn't cause the problem. So, you'll see a lot of hopelessness and helplessness, but hopefully you've got a support system outside of work that, will allow you to keep your sanity.
Very interesting. With that, you said two things. I know this is just an introduction, but
Sure.
I'm very curious now with having a healthy support system, like how did your position in the law enforcement impact your personal life, and how did you counteract the impacts to maintain a healthy balance between the two lives?
I think a couple things. I think you've got to, there's a tendency, and I saw a lot of people do this. There was a lieutenant who had 35 years on, and he was divorced. His kids were all grown up. And they put him in charge of the intelligence section. And those guys they were old enough and smart enough that they kind of ran the department or that area without having to have a supervisor, which is why they put him there, because he should have retired years ago. But he was so tied to, I am a police officer, instead of, and I think this is very healthy. I love being a cop, but it wasn't who I was. It's what I did for a living. I was a father and a husband and, a brother and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's important. And when I left when I came home, I came home. I didn't, if my wife and I talked about certain things, we talked about it and it was over. And, I never missed an event at my daughter's school, whether it meant I only went to work on 2 hours of sleep or whatever that was. So I think that's the first thing. It's not who you are, it's what you do for a living. And you have to keep that in mind, because there are a lot of people that say, without this gun and this badge, I'm nobody. And if you have that attitude, then you're heading down the wrong street. And I used to talk to kids in the recruit classes, because when I was on SWAT, we would train every month, and we train at the academy. And sometimes they'd have times like, will you talk to these guys? Sure. And I used to tell them, if you're here to, kick ass and take names, then you're in the wrong profession, because eventually there's going to be somebody bigger, stronger, and faster than you. And that's not going to happen. So I used to tell them, you'll spend 6 months or whatever it was in the academy getting to learn how to use all these tools on your belt. But the two most important tools that you bring with you, and it's your mouth and your brain. And I've seen people, and you probably have seen it in the Army too, take, based on what they say, they turn yes people into no people. And sometimes just the opposite. Based on what they say, they turn no people into yes people. And, the whole thing of law enforcement, what do we want? We want voluntary compliance. We want you to do what we ask you to do. And sometimes you need to explain that. And obviously you can tell I'm white. I had a white partner from Huntington, West Virginia, who had a master's degree from Marshall. And we ran an entirely African-American beat. And we ran it at night. And I mean, we led our relief in felony arrests, guns recovered, dope, all that stuff. And we never got complained on. And I really think the reason that we didn't is that we knew how to talk to people. If I'm going to stop your Ford F-150 because it matches the description of somebody who committed an armed robbery, well, when I go up there and realize that you're not the person, I need to explain that to you. Well, sir, the reason you were stopped is because your vehicle matches the description. It's not you. Thank you for your cooperation. Have a safe night. Do you have any questions for me? And if you tell people that, if you tell people why you're doing what you're doing, they're much more, or they're more readily willing to say, oh, okay, I understand. No problem. Thanks a lot. I'll see you later. But I've also seen cops that did that exact same thing. We're looking for a vehicle. They stop it. It matches the description. It's got 4 black guys in it. None of them are wanted. They're not the people we're looking for. And they keep saying, why'd you stop me? Why'd you stop me? And these cops are like, you can leave. It's like, why in the hell wouldn't you tell them why you stopped them?
Yeah.
I mean, you are turning yes people into no people by the fact that you think you're so tough that you can't, you don't have to tell them. You're right, you don't have to, but God, it may save me from getting shot 3 weeks from now when I stop them and they're pissed off. So,
Wow.
Anyway, sorry, that was a long explanation.
There's a lot of passion. There's a lot of that's deep. That runs really deep in your veins, and I like that to an extent where that is nobody thinks of that. And you brought up something as far as when people are being stopped, it's turning no people into yes people. But when you deal with those no people and there is an altercation and it's just from nothing, and next thing you know, the altercation becomes physical where you have to detain the individual, and then the individual doesn't even understand why the hell he's being detained when he did nothing wrong. And my biggest question that I've always wanted to ask was, would there be a benefit if we could teach civilians how to understand the situation that is happening? And it's almost like getting arrested, like to understand how to get, when that is happening, how to get arrested properly without having to make things worse when you're innocent. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. And I think that's why I'm not going to say every police department or every law enforcement agency, but a good number of them offer what they call civilian police academies, which allows you as a civilian to sign up. And, it's usually one night a week for, I don't know, a month or 2 months or something like that. And you go through a lot of the things that a police officer learns. And so you understand why we do what we do when we do it. And I think that, I understand why they handcuffed me. I understand that, that car was used in a carjacking. It's not the car and we're not the people, but they pulled us out at gunpoint and they handcuffed us. And then they realized it wasn't us. And, handcuffs come off just as quickly as they go on. But oh yeah, I understand why they do that. It's a safety issue for the police. Oh, I get that now. I didn't understand that before. Mm-hmm. So I always encourage people. It's like, look, if you want to know what we do or why we do what we do, please sign up for those classes and they'll be happy to explain it to you. And if you have questions, hey, why did this happen? Or if this were to happen, how would you handle it? And most of the people that run those academies or those citizen police academies are, they've got some time on. You don't send rookies to the academy and they'll explain, well, I had a situation and here's what happened and here's why I did what I did. But like you say, even if you've got in the moment, I've got to pull you out, put you on the ground, handcuff you. When it's over, I need to tell you why. Here's why we did what we did. And if you do that, I'm not going to tell you people are always happy. They're not, I just come from work. I'm pissed off. I want to go home and have a beer. But you just pulled me out, put me on the ground and handcuffed me. I'm pissed. But if you understand why we did it and we're not a jerk to you, you can live with it. And I think that goes back to how you treat people, kind of what you were saying earlier, how you treat people, you know, and I think you'll find this, and I think you'll see that, a lot of cops marry cops, and a lot of cops marry nurses and things like that,
Yeah.
because they see the same kind of things all the time. And I spent 10 years in a healthcare administration role, and there's a tendency in healthcare, just like there's a tendency in law enforcement, to think, in healthcare, oh, everybody's sick. Well, no, 99% of the people in the world are not sick. They're not, they're perfectly healthy. You just see the people that are sick every day, and your mind is like, well, everybody's sick. And the same thing is with being a cop. Everybody's a criminal. Everybody, it's like, no, 95% of the people in this world are good, common, decent, law-abiding citizens. It's the old 80-20 rule of business. 80% of your business comes from 20% of your customers. It's the same thing in law enforcement. 80% of your crime comes from 20% of your knuckleheads. So,
I didn't even think of it like that, but it makes sense, because every time you get called to a scene, it's not to congratulate you on a great day you're having. It's actually to deal with an altercation, and they don't want you there. It's like, why?
No, they don't. And when you look at these, especially now with mental health, Supreme Court has said we can't institutionalize these people. So now they have to be out in the community, whether that's they're homeless or whether they're living with mom and dad or a brother or sister or whatever. And, when that guy has an episode and he grabs a knife and you call 911 and we get there and we back up and we tell him to drop the knife and he comes at us and we shoot him, oh my God, you shot, he was having a mental health episode. I'm sorry. The most amount of money I ever made as a Cincinnati cop was $72,000 a year. That's not enough money to get killed over.
Right.
I'm sorry that I had to shoot your brother, but your brother didn't leave me any alternative. I tried a taser. The taser was ineffective. We tried verbal commands. We tried to back off. There's a certain point in time when you just got to say, here it comes. If you're going to come at me, and I had this with a guy with a knife. A woman called us. We get there, her hands all cut up. He's inside in the foyer of the house. We get there, the front door's open. He's kind of walking back and forth between the front door and the kitchen. And I've got my gun out and I've got my gun on him, and he's got a knife in his hand. And I there's an imaginary line that I had drawn. It's like, if he comes across that line, I will shoot him.
Yes.
And he never got to that line. He came close to it and then he would back off. And then he'd come close to it again and then he'd back off. And it just was to the point where I'm not going to have a choice. And that's the thing you got to understand. I don't want to take a life, but if I do everything I possibly can, and at that time we did not have tasers. So it was, you've got a knife, you brought a knife to a gunfight. Sorry. If you cross that line, you come at that knife with, I'm going to shoot you. And I thank God it didn't happen, but like I said, there was an imaginary line that I knew if he crossed, I'm pulling the trigger.
I'm not sure with how your training is on the spot moment and as far as on the spot corrections, but when you're in that experience and you're relying on your training to keep you safe, the public doesn't understand is why did you have to shoot him? And you trying to explain yourself between, he had a knife and I had to either make the decision of getting stabbed or shooting him, but it's still frowned upon because the fact is that you took his life when you could have, you could have grazed his shoulder, you could have shot him in the leg, but at that point, a lot of people don't understand is when you're running through all these scenarios on how to keep yourself safe, but also your partners, the entire environment, your training as far as that invisible line. That's what the Army had. It's a similar thing of where they got past a certain point. It's just you shoot, and it's always in the chest. I mean, you can't just autocorrect your training to shift over, because that would you most likely might miss, and that might cause you to lose your life over something that you now have to worry about is what the public sees.
You're right. And that's another thing that I think is important. You know, we talked about the civilian police academy, because they'll let you shoot and things like that. And I always tell the story when people ask me about that. So the state of Ohio required a 70% hit rate on your when you're doing firearms qualification.
Mhm.
Cincinnati said, no, it's 100%. You will not miss the target. So we practiced 100%. And as you say, center mass, you know, when I'm not shooting you in the leg, I'm not shooting you in the arm, you know, that's too under stress. And you know, this being in the Army, how your body reacts, you know, tunnel vision, you don't hear all that kind of stuff that goes on, you know, fine motor skills go away and stuff like that. That's why you shoot center mass. But so 100% is what we train for at the range. In a gunfight, in an actual gunfight out on the street, we found that our hit rate was 30%. So
Wow.
we went from 100% at the range, obviously the target's not shooting back at you, to if it's a real gunfight on the street, 30% is a good day for you. So, you know, 3 out of 10 shots are going to hit the guy. The other 7, God knows where they're going to go, but you're still responsible for those. So I used to tell people that, you know, I mean, you look at you know, we carried 9mm, you know, the bullet that comes out is about that big. You know, I mean, for me to go, hey, in a second, I'm going to try to hit you in the leg when you're moving and I'm moving, and you know, it's not realistic. But people don't understand that. They don't understand what it's like, you know. And I mean, you see you know, the movies, the Crips and the Bloods, you know, everybody's like, you know, I'm going to shoot you this, you know. And I mean, the tactics are horrible. That's why they never hit anybody, you know. I mean, and stuff. But yeah, you know, that whole firearms thing. And then, you know, we had a thing that was called FATS. It stood for Firearms Training Simulator. And I don't know how often we would go, but they would take you out of your shift and they would, you know, you'd go, it was over at District 4 and it was down in the basement and it was just a big room that had this huge screen in front of it. And they gave you your type of weapon. And it was all laser kind of thing. There were no bullets in it, but they would give you a scenario. You know, okay, you've been dispatched to whatever. Now watch the screen and act accordingly. And it would tell you where your shots went, you know, whether it was a hit or you missed. It would, you know, would tell you all kinds of stuff like that. And then when it was over, the instructor, I mean, this guy had like 30 years, retired, and then came back to run the FATS program. It would be like 20 questions. Okay, why did you do that? What did you see? Well, what would you say if a command staff asked you about this? Why? How can you articulate what you did? And that's the other thing that I tell, especially young people who are interested. Yeah, be proficient with your weapon, but also be proficient with the law and your policies and procedures that allowed you to do what you did, so that in a stressful situation. And I always used to tell my guys when I was a sergeant, like, if you ever get into shooting and I come to the scene, I'm going to have to ask you what happened. Here's what I want you to tell me. Sarge, I need to go to the hospital. Perfect. You go to the hospital. You know, I need to go to the hospital. I don't care if there's nothing wrong with you. You never got shot. You know, you're fine. Tell me you want to go to the hospital, because what am I going to say? No, you can't go. I'm going to have to make sure you go to the hospital. That gives you time to clear your head and figure out what happened and why you did what you did. Because I mean, that's the worst thing in the world. Stressful situation. Boom. Tell me what happened. Oh shit. You know.
You're still processing. You're in.
Yeah, exactly. And as we just said, what goes to hell? Your vision goes to hell. I never saw that. You know, I'm yelling at him to, you know, and that's the other thing. You know, drop the gun. Well, as much as you're having, you know, a situation where I'm having tunnel vision and I can't hear what's going on, so's the bad guy. So you're screaming at him to drop the gun. He's not hearing that. You know, he's not hearing you at all. And well, he didn't drop the gun, so I shot him. Okay. I mean, you can probably get away with that as a cop, but you got to realize that the same stuff you're experiencing, the bad guy's probably experiencing also. So.
Wow. Yeah, no, I never even thought of it like that. That is really interesting. I want the caveat on that training scenario that you go through when you are training. You go into this room. We did similar things with the Army, as far as we would have a rifle and we would get put into a situation and just practice accordingly. It's probably not as structured, more relaxed. It's because there's so many guys that got to get through there. But they
Right.
ask us a lot of questions be after Army review or after action review. And it's just, it goes through what we did and why we did it and how we could have done it better. And no, I like that. I like the structure. I like the foundation. And that's where I want to shift my next profession would be towards something like that.
Yeah. And we didn't do that, we didn't debrief like that, for on a shift, but every time we had a SWAT call up, that we did. And so, the tactical guys and the negotiators, we get in a room and it's like, and it didn't matter if we'd been out there for 8 hours and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, we're going back to the conference room and we're going to break it down. Here's what happened. Why did you do this? What did you say? What was the problem? Oh, I couldn't hear you. Oh, okay. We got to work on that, or, whatever. So we debriefed every call out that we had, whether we're kicking in a door to, get a drug suspect, or whether it's a barricaded subject who's, drunk and holding his wife hostage. And, I remember that was hilarious. I had a guy, literally a guy was holding his wife hostage. He was drunk. And I get there and I get on the phone with him and I'm like, what would it take for you to come out? He's like, give me a beer. And I'm like, you want a beer? I said, if I give you a beer, you'll come out. You'll let your wife go, put the gun down and come out? Yep. He's like, will you let me drink it? I said, absolutely. I gave a guy $5. One of the district guys said, go down to the store and get a beer. Tactical guys put it on the front porch. I'm like, you come out, let your wife out, put the gun down, come out. They're going to handcuff you, but I promise you I'll let you drink the beer. And that's exactly what happened. Then he went to jail. So
that's funny because it's like you hold your word, and that's kind of how I am. Like, I'm a man of my word because I expect the world to kind of be that way, as a version of me. But it's, people don't see it that way. But the way I look at it is, and how are we going to get the change we want? We have to be the example of what change is supposed to look like.
and that's hard because, like, for us as negotiators, we had a standard policy. We never lied to the people. I mean, it's like, I don't want to go to jail. Oh, okay, you won't have to go to jail. I'd be like, no, sorry. When you come out, you're going to go to jail. I can't lie to you, because we had too many repeat customers, that 6 months from now, we're negotiating with the same guy. Excuse me. And, if he remembers you lied to me, then your credibility is gone. But like when I was in the drug unit, I had this little red light on my keychain. And so we used to tell people, it's like, oh, you were dealing drugs. No, I wasn't doing it. It wasn't me. I'm like, okay, give me your hands. And we would just take like an alcohol wipe and we'd wipe it on their hands, and then we'd shine the light on it. It's like, oh, see right there? See that shininess? That the red light, see the shininess? You've been holding drugs. Well, yeah, I was just holding them. So now their stories changed. And it's like, I just wiped something wet on your hands and shined a light on it. It's going to glisten. And I just made you think that glistening means you help, so I'm technically lying to you, but I don't have any, anything that I can arrest you for. So I'm trying to get you to incriminate yourself, which you just did, because you just told me I didn't touch drugs. I didn't do anything. Now you're telling me, oh, I was just holding them. So now I know you're the right person. So, you'll find that the nuances and what you say and how you say it. And, you kind of get people to hang themselves if you're good at talking to people, so anyway, sorry, I'm talking a lot. I apologize.
No, I'm enjoying this. This is I wanted to get like an intro as far as like a preview on how I can display who you are, which I give away in the private content that I have going, and people can check it out and they're like, oh wow, I didn't hear this on the interview. So I like to try to do something different before the actual interview.
Nice.
But I also came across, you have a book that you're also trying to get out there. As far as, what does that book entail? Is it, because I believe it covers a large variety of experiences, not just law enforcement.
It does. And it's funny because I literally wrote this book I had my leg amputated on April 21st, and I started chemotherapy for the tumors that are in my lungs in June. So between April and June, I wrote this book. And I always say, I wrote it, but I really feel it was kind of inspired by God. It's like, hey, you need to write this book. And it was a book born out of two conversations that I had. One between a girl who I was on when I coached basketball. She was a point guard on my team. She and her boyfriend moved to Denver, and my wife and I have had dinner with her several times. And I sent her a text one day. I said, I'm really excited to kind of watch you find and live your purpose. And she kind of came back to me with, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I'm like, Taylor, that's what life is all about, finding whatever your purpose is. And then once you find it, living it. I said, so I don't know. You're going to have to figure that out. And we had a discussion about that. And then I had a basketball player down at the Citadel who contacted me on LinkedIn and said, can you give me some things that will help me not only be successful in business, but be successful in life? And so I started to kind of write stuff down. And eventually I had these like 10 principles. And I mean, some of them are kind of basic, but one of the ones that I really like is that most people think with their fears and their insecurities instead of using their minds. And I know I've done it. You've probably done it in your life, where, oh, I really want to do that. Oh, I'm scared. And you let your mind, you let your brain override, like if you right now said, yeah, I really want to be a cop. Oh, but it's scary. And, I'm not going to make a lot of money. And, those people aren't real popular right now. If you start listening to that voice enough, I'm not going to do it.
Yes.
So I then kind of had these 10 principles, and I had enough life experience, whether it was through cancer or law enforcement or other people that I knew, that I had stories that could, basically dovetail in with those different principles and explain why they were important and why I think they are things that can lead people to live an uncommon and extraordinary life, which I believe we're all just destined to do. But again, that has nothing to do with the type of job you have or how much money you make or anything like that. We're not all born with the same gifts and talents, but we all have the ability to become the best person that we're capable of becoming. So that's kind of how this book happened and came about. And, it's been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot about publishing that I had no idea about.
Oh, I bet. What was the biggest issue you had as far as getting all this knowledge from your own experiences onto paper?
I think probably the biggest issue was I initially had my foot amputated, and before I had my leg amputated. And I remember laying in bed at night kind of being like, okay, what now? Where do I go from here? I didn't really have any goals. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. And so I'd lay in bed at night and be like, okay, God, what next? Where do you want me to go? There's an old joke that says, when we talk to God, it's called prayer. When God talks to us, it's called schizophrenia, but I was kind of, hoping that the clouds would part and God, you will do this. And that never happened. But I started to have people in my life who said, hey, you ought to write a book, or you ought to start a blog or whatever. And, as I said, I'm old enough that I can barely turn on my cell phone. So starting a blog was a little daunting for me. And so I made basically two rules. I said, when I'm going to write this book, I'm going to write one page every day, minimum, and I'm not going to edit anything until I'm totally done with the first draft of the book. And so that's what I did. And there were days that I wrote stuff that I'm like, this is absolute crap. This will never see, the page of any book. But then there were days where it was like, man, that was pretty good, and so you kind of work through it. And it's funny because the guy who published the book, a friend of mine here in Denver, who was a police officer in Dayton when I was in Cincinnati, introduced me to this gentleman. He was he ran a drug task force in Louisiana, and then he was a police chief of a small city in Louisiana. And one of his friends said to him, hey, would you mind coming out to California and putting on a seminar for writers who want to understand police tactics and incorporate them in their books so they know what they're talking about? And he's like, yeah, sure, I'll come out and do that. Well, he goes out there and he ends up meeting his wife, and she's written like 34 best-selling fiction books. And he gets out of law enforcement, and they started this small not-for-profit publishing company called Five Stones. And So I get introduced to him, I mean, really,
Oh,
he had no idea I had a book. I had no idea really kind of what he did. And we started talking. And, after a couple months, it was like, hey, I've got a publishing company. He's like, hey, I got a book, and that's kind of how that came out. And it was, the nice thing about it is it gave you the same tools that say a large publishing, I had 3 different editors who went through the book and would be like, I don't think you should include this, or maybe you should shorten, but it was all my choice, no, I want to keep that, or yeah, that's right, I'll take that out. And, and then another editor, and then finally a copyright or a proofreading editor, is everything spelled right and all that kind of stuff. So I got all the things from that I would have gotten at a big publishing company. And they also knew, how to work with Amazon, how the algorithms at Amazon worked, and Barnes and Noble and all that kind of stuff. So it was, kind of a long answer to your question. I mean, really, it was 1 page a day. I'm not going to edit anything until the end. And that's kind of how it happened.
no, that's awesome. And I love how you answer it, because you give me a little bit more than what I've bitten off. And that's excellent, because I welcome knowledge. I welcome the wisdom, because I'm all about bettering myself every day, physically, mentally, and spiritually. So I do appreciate your time and your answers. It's answered intellectually and articulated very well and performed. But let's transition out of this prequel, I think this was called, or a preview of what our episode will be, and get you set up for our recording, which felt like our recording, but not necessarily.
Understand.
So I will email you another calendar link that will set you up for a 60-minute, and 72 hours before our recording, I will email you a Google Doc, which will contain a media release form. It'll contain an episode outline. It'll contain topics, and it will contain a couple questions. And how you answer those questions will pivot the direction on how the interview will go, which I won't give you all the questions.
That's fine.
I find that I've done that already, and it becomes rehearsed where I got to stop you like, whoa, I need to ask you that.
Yeah. I understand. I totally understand. I as you probably figured out, sometimes you got to shut me up. So, don't feel like, hey, Terry, shut up. I got to ask you another question. That's not going to hurt my feelings at all.
Okay, most definitely. But I would love to help you out with shining the spotlight on your book. And
Thank you.
Do you have any like way I can preview it, as far as, do you have like a 10-page like draft of something, or somehow I can look through it? Because I would love to dissect it and highlight it by going through it.
Sure, I can. I'm going to make myself a note, because again, as I said, I'm older. I tend to forget things. Yeah, I've got a like an electronic version. It's the version before it went to the proofreader. So I'll send that to you. It's the whole book, but there may be some typos in there because, like I said, it's before the proofreader. But in general, it'll be what the book is like if you were to buy it on Amazon or something like that. Okay. I'll send that to you.
Ready, and I will delete it after our interview, just so.
No, you don't have to delete it. I mean, I didn't write the book to make money. I wrote the book to try to help people, and if that's what it does, if you want to hang on to it and refer to it, that's fine with me too. It's fine.
Excellent. Awesome. That's fantastic. I feel like I've noticed it with the people I was interviewing. When I actually dissected it more and pulled out things inside, they've gotten more return on their investment by talking about it more specifically, where people can resonate from certain situations. So
absolutely. Yeah. I've had people as old as 87 tell me, gee, I wish I would have had this book when I was 20. And I've had one of the couples that I gave it to when I wrote it, I'm like, is this any good or is this crap? I mean, he's a former Navy SEAL and she's a lawyer. And they were like, oh my God, you got to publish this. This is great. I'm like, well, if you two feel that way, then I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that could gain some benefit from what's in here. So
awesome. Well, I will put you in the books, and I will send you that link. And okay. I look forward to our interview.
Me too. I'm looking forward to. Have a great holiday.
Thank you. And Terry, do I have permission to use this recording for today?
Absolutely.
Excellent. Okay.
Absolutely.
All righty. Thank
Great. You have a good Christmas.
you. You too.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.